Hey everybody, Paul Esden Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. Thanks for joining us here. We're streaming live in a lot of different places. Glad you took the time to join us, whether you're watching live with us as we record and broadcast live every Thursday at 3 o'clock, or you're listening or watching after the fact. We appreciate it, and I'm, as always, joined by my main man, my main squeeze, Randy Mueller, NFL front office insider, joining us, and former NFL general manager at multiple stops, executive of the year. I can only hope to achieve half of that level of fame and something shiny for, the fireplace. That'd be nice. Let's bring him in. Randy, what's up, brother?
Hey, Paul, I appreciate the nice introduction. That and $3 will get you a Starbucks on any corner in Seattle. Trust me. What I've done doesn't really matter. So I'm glad to be on with you. Hey, how about this? You tell me if I'm wrong. The Final Four are the four best teams in the NFL. I don't have any doubt in my mind. It finally worked out like these are the teams that should deservingly be there, in my opinion.
100%. And again, we get kind of the nature of the beast, as Daniel Jeremiah has said before, that we had the crash course of who we thought was going to be there in the NFC and Eagles 49ers. Like it was predestined. We knew it was going to be, and then it is. And then it's funny, on the other side, we don't necessarily have 1 and 2, how the NFL had it choreographed. Nonetheless, though, the Bengals are one of the hottest teams in all of football, and you have them against Kansas City, the rematch of the AFC title game last year. I mean, this is spectacular football. And I was talking to my radio host, because on top of all this, I'm a sports talk radio host as one of my other day jobs. And he told me as we were heading in, looking at the spreads, everything, he's like, I have no idea what the heck I'm going to pick. And I said, that's good news. That means we got some great games. So it's spectacular. And I love the Final Four we have, and so many potential Super Bowl matchups here. Oh, this is going to be tasty, Randy. I think we're in for a good weekend.
I don't think there's any fluke about any of these teams. I think they're all legitimate, deep run teams. And yeah, maybe it's not the teams who we began the season talking about, or even at the halfway pole, but it comes out to who's hot at the right time. And these are clearly the best teams. And there's a couple of them on a pretty good heater right now. So I'm anxious to see them on Sunday.
Yeah, and we'll get into all of that, but let's get into the breaking news of today. And the New York Jets have finally made a move. I know we have a lot of New York Jets listeners and viewers in our audience. They have hired Nathaniel Hackett as their new offensive coordinator. Of course, he was most recently with the Denver Broncos as their head coach, and was let go before the year was complete. Things not going as well as obviously they would have hoped. And I want to throw this over to you, Randy, because it's interesting, because head coach Robert Saleh of the Jets, he spoke earlier today about the hiring process and talking to Nathaniel Hackett. And during that conversation, he said that they discussed the quarterback position, and the plan is to bring in a veteran quarterback for the New York Jets. And a couple of beat reporters tried to dance around, because the quarterback I think all of us would connect Nathaniel Hackett to is Aaron Rodgers, and he's still under contract. However, they said, hey, are there any quarterbacks that may have ties to Nathaniel Hackett that you guys may have discussed? Wink. And so I said, no, I'm not sure what you're talking about. We kind of just talked about the position overall. We didn't get into any names. That will come later. First off, Randy, as a former NFL general manager, is the BS meter up there, or is he telling the truth that no specific quarterback names would have been discussed in the interview process? Because that seems kind of crazy, considering that was the biggest question for this OC job.
Well, I think if you really gave some truth serum out, Paul, you'd probably find out that they had a discussion about all kinds of quarterbacks, including those that are going to be free agents, the ones that are on the Jets roster, and any potential guys that are out there. That probably included Derek Carr, probably included Aaron Rodgers. It included all of them. You'd be crazy not to have the discussion. It's not anything that they can say publicly, so people just have to wink, like you said, and deal with it. But I think what it tells me more than anything is that system that Green Bay runs, that Hackett ran in Denver, is really not far from where they're at, with the Jets last year. It's a very similar system. So that tells me they may have changed the head of the snake, but the snake may wiggle the same way. So that one I took with a little, I don't know. I understand it. I do know this. Nathaniel Hackett is a really good guy. We even heard Aaron Rodgers say it when he left Green Bay. He said he loved seeing his face every day. So the fact that he failed in Denver as a head coach does not mean that the future is tainted as a coordinator. So we'll see. I think it's probably good for Zach Wilson in that the terminology will be similar. I think a lot of things that they'll see next year will be things that they had done before. Just they kept it all in the family, and I guess that shouldn't surprise us.
Well, let me ask you a quick follow-up on that, Randy, because it's interesting. Because the Jets, once they made the move from Mike LaFleur and moved on from him, they said, we're going to cast a wide net. And they did. According to Peter Schrager of Good Morning Football, they spoke to 20 candidates. Robert Saleh said it was over 15. That was the number he confirmed at his presser. And it was all kinds of schemes. He said that they would explore and look under a lot of different rocks. And technically, when you look at the names that have been confirmed by the Jets, there were a lot of names. But at the end of the day, Randy, you're right. They went back to the same well, sort of. I mean, Mike LaFleur's older brothers, Matt LaFleur is a Green Bay Packers head coach. There's a lot of connective tissue there. So again, I ask you, the BS meter, does that go up that it was kind of talk? Of course, we're going to look at everything, but then you just came back to kind of what you know. Is there kind of BS to what they were trying to say in the beginning about wide net and this and that? Because it doesn't look like much of a wide net when we get to the end result.
Well, I think the process is clear. They talked to as many people as they could, and they probably gathered as much information as they could with regard to systems, processes, but they also gleaned from these candidates their probable opinion on Jets players and on offensive guys in particular, and on quarterbacks even more particular. So they kind of got the lay of the land. They had an election, so to speak, and had 20 voters in it, and they all came in the booth, got to explain what they want to do, and then they ended up with, from my opinion, kind of more of the same. So I guess the direction is clear. They didn't want to upset the apple cart and force, whether it's Zach Wilson or anybody else, to learn a whole new jargon, so to speak, and take another turn in the development curve. I wish I knew, Paul. I wish I knew what their intent was at the end of it, because the window dressing was clear. I just don't know if, like you say, if it's BS or window dressing, but fact is they went back to really, they came full circle, in my opinion.
Is there real value, Randy? And I'm fascinated to know this. When you interview, like in this particular case, 20 guys, I mean, that's a lot of names. It almost feels similar to the draft process when you talk to a lot of players, even if you know they're out of your range. I've heard NFL people tell me before that they kind of keep a catalog. It's good to get a bunch of information. Mm-hmm. So if they play that player in the future, they'll have some level of data. In that same case, is that sort of the thing with coaching, that talking to a lot of these minds, maybe it's just kind of the brain shock, the brain swap. They try to just do a brain drain when they bring these guys in for a lot of information. So sometimes there's more benefits than just trying to actually fill a vacancy on the staff.
Oh, 100%. I know it happens with GMs too, because I've been part of that. I felt like I had interviewed a time or two with places they had no intent on hiring me ever, but they wanted to glean everything they could. They wanted to ask me the hard questions. They wanted to get my opinion on a lot of stuff. And so that could have been what they did. I think interviewing 20 people, whether it's plus 15 or 20, that's a lot. And to me, that's overkill. That almost defeats the purpose. I don't know how you can be sharp for 20 interviews. If you're Robert Saleh, if you're Joe Douglas, that's really hard. You might talk to 4 or 5 guys, narrow it down to 1 or 2, and then talk to them again. That seems to make a lot more sense. I think the wide net in this case, I'm not sure what purpose that served, especially when they ended up with the result that they got, which isn't far off the tracks that they've been driving for the last couple of years.
Let's do a detour on what you just said. That is fascinating to me, that sometimes you felt like you did a few interviews where they were just trying to get a bunch of information out of you. And it feels similar. I've had some other jobs in life where there was a promotion up for grabs and they brought me into the room to say, hey, what's your plan, kid? And when I gave them the plan, they said, not bad plan. You're not getting the job, but he is. And we're going to execute that plan. And I'm like, what the heck? What gives here? So, right. Randy, how do you kind of protect yourself when you have some of those conversations and you sense that a little bit?
There's no doubt. I think a lot of times, and probably coordinator fits in that role. I know it did as a GM, sometimes as a head coach, is they're obtaining all the information they can. It's not the most qualified or sometimes the best candidate that gets the job, as we all know. It's the one that fits best with what they have going. And that's the criteria I think people fail to see. In this case, they feel like they've got a decent amount of staff and people with this terminology and this background, that it might be easier for, a new coach like Hackett to just fit in seamlessly. That sometimes takes the day with regard to these decision-making roles. I'm imagining it's the same in any industry, Paul. I don't know that. I've only been in football my whole life, but it seems to me like it happens more so in football than I've ever been aware of or a part of, where it's not the best guy who gets the job. It's the guy who fits with all the other parts that are already existent in the building.
And let's get one more here on the Jets, and we'll move around the rest of the league here. This one's an interesting one, and we've talked about Zach Wilson a lot on this show. But if they bring in a quarterback, and again, Robert Saleh at his press conference today once again reiterated that their plan is to get a veteran quarterback in here, and he said it without saying it, but he got pretty close at the end on his final answer that, Zach Wilson's going to ride the pine, and whoever they're bringing in is going to be the guy, and that there won't really be one of these faux competitions that sometimes happens. And I ask you this, Randy, is there a chance that Zach Wilson potentially, who is at one point the number 2 overall pick, the promised child, the savior of the franchise, when they bring in this veteran that is going to be clearly the starter and there's no real competition, can he be messed up mentally as a young man that I'm the guy. Oh, wait, now I'm not the guy. They're saying they believe in him, but you obviously, it's coming out of one side of your mouth and the other if you end up throwing some significant assets at the quarterback position.
I don't know how much more harm they could do to him, Paul, to be honest with you. I mean, he's been through the ringer, some of his own ilk, some of other people's fault. So there's plenty of blame. I wouldn't worry too much about his temperament, his personality, or his view of the future right now. I know this, I wouldn't want to give up on him. So if the coach says he wants to bring in a veteran guy, great, I get it. And maybe Zach does ride the pine, like you said, for a while. I surely wouldn't move off of him right now. I just think he's got to have a lot of water has to flow under the bridge before Zach's going to get another opportunity, even if it's with the Jets. And so I think a bridge guy, a guy that they can get a couple years out of, might be just the option for that. But at some point, Zach's going to play again, mark my words, as a quarterback for the New York Jets. That will determine his fate, whatever that window is, whether somebody else gets hurt, whether somebody else underachieves. I don't think you've seen the last of Zach Wilson, no matter what the powers that be say, because of the reasons you just said. He's a second pick in the draft. We're paying him X amount of money. There were a lot of people that saw really great things, not good things, great things in Zach Wilson when they chose him at number 2. Maybe it's part of the problem is he has to grow up. Maybe his leadership style isn't what everybody wants. That only comes with time and maturity. So I don't think we've seen the end of him. He may not be the guy next year, but he'll figure in at some point, I can promise you.
All right, let's stay on the East Coast. Let's go down to Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Eagles are in the NFC Championship game, and the thing that fascinates me, Randy, is for people, first off, in a lot of sports, as soon as a team wins a championship, whether it's for the first time in the Eagles case, which was back in 2017, or in a general sense, we always say, ooh, is this team the dynasty? What does the core look like? Can this team, okay, now that they won 1, can they win 2? Can they be in the conversation for a while? And I remember a lot of people in the prisoner of the moment after the Eagles won their first championship in franchise history, they said, look at all these core players that are under contract for a long time. They're going to be here for a while. Well, they weren't. They disappeared, but yet this Eagles team has rebirthed itself, almost like the flaming phoenix that burns down and rises from the ashes. The Eagles that won the Super Bowl in 2017 had a different head coach and a different starting quarterback. Randy, how unique is that for an NFL franchise in a span of what will, I guess, be 6 years if we're counting 2023, really 5 years, to flush out a head coach, flush out a quarterback, and bring in new answers at both of those positions and can potentially win another Super Bowl in such a short amount of time?
Extremely rare in this day and age where change is part of our landscape now. I think you got to credit Howie Roseman. That's the one constant, in the whole process. He's built 2 teams now that the second one may indeed go to the Super Bowl again, 5 years later. So you got to give him credit. He's piqued everybody's curiosity as to how he does it and what he's willing to risk, being aggressive, but yet having enough patience to stick with the right people. So I think that's rare in this business. It's rare that one guy would have the opportunity, because usually what happens is when you have a couple down years, even after you win, somebody's looking to replace you. And that is a credit to Jeff Lurie for holding steady with regard to his decision makings and processes. I think the number one thing that you can talk about what the Eagles have done, and they've been up, they've been down a little bit, now they're back up. I think what you've got to credit them with is having a process regard to every decision they make from the personnel side. That doesn't happen in a lot of NFL places. There is no process. There's kind of operating off the cuff. It's kind of ready, fire, aim at times. And you cannot accuse Howie of that. They're process oriented. They're very sharp people. He understands his evaluators. Now, Howie may not be the greatest evaluator himself, but he evaluates his evaluators. That's kind of his style. And he has some pretty good people around him giving him information. Then he makes the decision. There's nothing wrong with that process, that structure, or that design. And he's proven that it's really worked for them. It may not work for everybody, but it's worked for them. And he's also hit on, you got to have timing. You got to have some things work out for you. He's hit on some pretty good additions, whether it's Nick Sirianni or Shane Steichen, or these guys are special people in our business now, and they just happen to be employed in the same building. And you got to credit Howie for making that happen.
And how much longer are they going to be here? They have 2 first-round picks in the upcoming 2023 NFL Draft, including one of them in the top 10, thanks to the New Orleans Saints trade. Man, I mean, Howie is a gosh darn wild man out there with the Eagles. And I go to this, and I feel like we've almost answered this question within itself, but nonetheless, is this version of the Eagles sustainable? They have Jalen Hurts, which is, again, unique to find your quarterback in the second round, which obviously provides a ton of benefits from a rookie contract standpoint,
right.
But he has kind of burst out of nowhere. Is this sustainable with Jalen Hurts, or is he a bit of a flash in the pan? Because we are seeing absolute stark differences from, I remember the Jalen Hurts of last year that got eliminated in the opening round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he looked like he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, Randy. Mm-hmm. And then this year, he's this dynamic passer and dual threat runner as well. From that standpoint, he's taken the league by storm. He's among the MVP candidates this year. Is this sustainable, or is this a flash in the pan in your mind?
Oh, no, I think it is sustainable, but you've got to go back further with Jalen Hurts. You saw 2 different quarterbacks, from the one that got benched at Alabama at halftime of the championship game, who went to Oklahoma and developed his passing game, that part of it, as a thrower, and then going to the next level to the Eagles, where he came in as a thrower and has become a passer. So I'm crediting him with stepping incrementally along the way and getting good at his trade. It also helps that he has the same people around him for more than 1 year, and he's had that for the first time in his career the past 2 years. So I do think it's sustainable. And not only that, I think the Eagles can flourish with him, especially the fact that he's on a rookie deal. Now, that's not going to last forever. When you say sustainable, long-term in the NFL, Paul, is 2 years, okay? 2 years. Yes. If you look beyond that, ask Matt Rule how that 4 or 5 year plan went in Carolina. So that's disingenuous. And if you believe that, your head's in the sand and you don't know how the NFL works. So you can talk the talk about that, but it is 2 years. You've got to be willing to not sit on your hands. And again, Howie's done that. He could have easily sat on his hands and milked a Super Bowl in 2017. Didn't happen that way. He stayed aggressive. He stayed after it. And just look at the way he built this year's team. They were already a good team before they added Ndamukong Suh and a couple of these other guys they got midstream this season. I give them credit for that. They played an integral role down the stretch because they had some injuries, and it wasn't if you have them, it's just when, and he was ready for it. So I give him credit for vision, and I give him credit for the visionary standpoint on Jalen Hurts too. Now, I will say this about Jalen. He's done all the work. He should get all the credit. But Shane Steichen and what they've done on offense has really brought him out of his kind of quarterback in the NFL shell and made him a passer, not a thrower. And I didn't know that was possible at this speed, but they've done a great job at it. A year ago, when we talked about Jalen Hurts, everybody said he's got to improve his passing game. He's got to improve his passing game from the pocket. Guess what? That's easier said than done, but he's done it. Mm-hmm. And they've got perimeter players around him now to help with that. Credit Howie. This sounds like a kumbaya for the Eagles going on and on, but it is what it is, and you got to give people credit. It's hard to do at the NFL level.
All right, let's pick one way or the other here, Randy. I'll put you up against it. Are the Eagles lucky, or this visionary in which you speak? Because the Eagles, according to a lot of reports, were digging around Deshaun Watson, some of these big quarterbacks that were available over the last couple of years after they the Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, and all that eroded. They were doing some digging, and ultimately they didn't land him, so they said, I guess we have Jalen Hurts, who exploded this year. So again, is it luck? Is it visionary, or maybe both?
I think it's a little of all. I think some of the best deals that I ever made, Paul, as a GM, were the ones I didn't make, but I wanted to.
I love that.
That's just fact. It's not an exact science. I think they gave this opportunity to him, and Jalen ran through with flying colors and got better. And you got to give him credit for that. I know this, when they drafted him in the second round, they didn't think they were going to have an MVP candidate. If you gave Howie truth serum, he would admit that. They thought maybe we'll come up with a little Taysom Hill package of plays. We'll be able to run and do some things with RPOs. They didn't know or anticipate him getting to these heights, but credit to the kid, credit to his intangibles, credit to his character and work ethic. And he's broke the seal. And I think everybody should be lauded for the fact that he is developed, but no more than Jalen Hurts himself.
Randy, let's get one more on the Eagles in here. We don't have the audio for this, guy, so you guys are just going to have to listen with your minds here. But Nick Sirianni went viral during the NFL divisional round against the Giants, where they were going for 2, and a lot of people kind of raised their eyebrow why they were going for 2 at that point when they were up by so many points. And Nick Sirianni came all the way down near the red zone, where he was looking at the formation. It seemed like the Giants were running, and he ultimately ended up calling timeout. He turned to the official and he said, "I know what the bleep I'm doing," when he ran down to the goal line. And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, with some people trending that Nick Sirianni has the most punchable face in the NFL and has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Randy, what did you make of the whole Nick Sirianni viral clip with the official?
I did not see it that way at all, Paul. I thought he had a clear picture of what he wanted to do. I actually took it as a badge of courage. He had leadership ability. He went down there. He didn't care who said what. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. And my guess is he saw something, or they did during the week, that they knew that going for 2 was guaranteed. It was a guaranteed defense they were going to see. And for whatever reason, it didn't show up, and he decided to change his mind. I just think he's a confident guy. Now, I've been with him for many years with the Chargers, so I've had these kind of conversations with him on the sideline in practice. I like his style. I don't think it's a punchable face. I think it's a confident face that people will find enduring in the long run, especially Eagles fans.
Yeah, and we'll see if he ends up being one of the Coach of the Years. Again, the AP has released the top 3 and top 5 for several of the awards that we will be seeing at the NFL Award Show here in a couple of weeks. And again, a fantastic job of what they were able to do with the Eagles. Let's jump all over to the AFC Conference with the Cincinnati Bengals. And wow, once again, Joe Burrow and the Bengals are here. And we do have this audio, which we're going to get to. And it was a viral clip from Joe Burrow and classic Joe Cool talking about that window that exists when he's the quarterback.
Window's my whole career, and everybody that we have in that locker room, all the coaches we have, things are going to change year to year, but our window's always open.
And look at that. The window is always open. Now, people, the same way, and Nick Sirianni, as you just mentioned, Randy, have interpreted things in multiple ways before. Some people looked at that and said, what the arrogant hell is with this quarterback that says, assumes that the window of his career is the window? Because some other people would say, we have a tight window here. We got to do what we can, be aggressive in the championship window. Joe Burrow, Joe Cool, as always, says, of course, the entire career is my window. I'm Joe freaking Burrow, baby, is what he said. How did you interpret this one, Randy? Fascinating comment from old Joe.
Absolutely loved it. Just like the confidence that Nick Sirianni showed, I think this is a true inner look at what Joe really is. Yeah, he's cool. Yeah, he's calm, but he understands the process. He understands how good he is. He doesn't want to beat his chest, and he's really not trying to. He's trying to say, hey, seriously, you think we have that tight of a window? I'm in year 3 and I'm fixing to go to my 2nd Super Bowl already. So I think he has the backing of everybody in that organization, in that they've said and promised him, and he's fixing to get a whole bunch of money dumped on his front yard, that they're going to do whatever it takes as long as he's there. They'd be crazy not to spend money and continue to support him with every weapon, every offensive lineman, everybody they can to make this run with Joe Burrow at the helm. So I think I liked it. I thought it was great. If people took it the wrong way, so be it. I compared it to this, Paul, and this might be a little before your time, but Larry Bird used to come out and win the 3-point contest at the All-Star game all the time, right? And he even won it one time in his warm-up top. And he made it clear ahead of time. He'd say, this is all for 2nd place. He said, I don't know what you guys are all getting fired up for. That's the kind of confidence I like. And I grew up with a little trash talking. I see no problem in that, and I don't see any problem with what Joe Burrow said.
And I love it. My father was born in Gardner, Mass, baby. So we all know the Larry Bird and the Celtics, baby, that my family was born on over there in TD Garden. Shout out to the Boston Celtics, who are doing amazing. And you know what? That clip that we just played was not just from after the Bengals beatdown of the Bills. However, it was ahead of that game of the Bengals Bills, which ended up being in the divisional round. So while certainly you could say Joe Burrow talked the talk, well, certainly they walked to walk going inside Buffalo in hostile territory. The weather of Buffalo, and even beyond that, we talked about Damar Hamlin, who was at that, and again, the obvious connection to the Bengals-Bills game the first time, which was a very scary situation back that was going to be the big game of the year in terms of Bills-Bengals on Monday Night Football. So we had all of that. It seemed like everything was in the Bills' direction, yet the Bengals, from pillar to post, from A to Z, just dominated, quite frankly, the Buffalo Bills on the road. And it was an absolute statement performance. If you didn't already believe in Cincinnati, you certainly did there. And again, I think a lot of people, Randy, and I don't know if these people are looking very smart right now, the Bengals run last year, we often talk about what they say the Super Bowl hangover, that maybe a team that kind of comes out of the woodwork and surprised us, as the Bengals surprised a lot of people last year. Okay, they surprised, but now harsh reality will hit them. They're in their second straight AFC title game, which is the first time that's ever happened in Bengals history. Are they here to stay, Randy?
I think they are, and I kind of agree with Joe's analysis. The window's open as long as I'm here and I'm healthy. He gives them a different flavor, a different look, a different chance, and a chance to make a deep run. I think we'll be talking about him like we talk about the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, or even Brady with the Patriots. You knew that if he was healthy, they were going to make a deep run, and they had a chance. So he's definitely put himself on that type of a pedestal and on the stage to where he's one of the greats in the league in year 3. I think you mentioned it. I think Buffalo and most of the prognosticators, including myself, were a little surprised the way Cincinnati opened up a can on them. They got after him from Jump Street, and there was really nothing the Bills could do about it. Now, I will say this. I think the Bills emotionally looked to me like they kind of were spent. I thought the Damar Hamlin thing would turn out to be a positive for them, and it would be a rallying cry. I think they spent so much emotion on that. Earlier in the season, if you remember, they had to reschedule a game, go to Detroit 2 times in 4 days. I just think it was a long, grinding season for the Bills, and it showed to me that they didn't have a lot left in their tank. So I think the Bengals took advantage of that. But I think you're right. Last year when the Bengals made this run, I even thought, well, they've been a little lucky. You know, they got the Titans on a down day. They got the Chiefs on a down day. But they proved to be more so than any luck team ever, because they have now 3-0 against Kansas City. They've beat all the good teams in the league this year. They beat Tennessee. They beat Buffalo. They beat them all. So I don't know what else we can expect from these guys. Their defense is probably as under talked about as any group in the league the last 5 years, because all they do is do what that coordinator wants to do. They're not fancy, but they do it really good. They don't make mental mistakes. They keep plays in front of them, all the things that Super Bowl teams do, and they're just as efficient as any defense in the league. They may not have the star players that say a Fred Warner or a Bosa have out of San Francisco, but they have plenty of firepower, and they play really good team defense. So I think the Bengals are around, to answer your question in a long-winded way. I think they're around for a while, and I don't think they're going anywhere. It'll be interesting to see how many guys become free agents, because in the past, those guys have fled out of Cincinnati. They tend to take care of their own to a point, but they're going to have some decisions to make over the next couple of years to really take care of their guys and kind of keep this nucleus together.
And that's exactly what you said. Now, they've done a really good job both last year getting to the Super Bowl, and that 1 4th down Aaron Donald disruption away from maybe potentially winning that game. And then you go to this year, they're at a minimum, obviously, at the AFC Championship game. We'll see what they do in Kansas City. But as you mentioned, the recent success against the Chiefs, well, obviously, with what the Bengals just did in Buffalo, they're not going to be scared heading into Arrowhead. They're like, we've done this before. Let's go.
This year. And, they did it this year. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a crazy game in itself. And then they did it in the AFC Championship game last year as well. So they're going to come in with some moxie. They're going to come in with some confidence. There's no question about it. But they will have to win in a new way. As you just mentioned, Joe Burrow is due an absolute bag this offseason. So I can only imagine what that money's going to look like, because, again, they've been having this success so far on Joe Burrow's rookie contract, which is a great benefit. Every GM wants that to happen. Hit on the quarterback and then ride that out and try to win as much as possible. Russell Wilson in Seattle won their first title, and they were trying to win a second title back-to-back on a lot of that success. So that will be the big key, and Jamar Chase eventually will be paid as well. So we'll have to see how they are able to sustain that winning despite all the money they're going to have to throw around there, Randy. That'll make it more difficult.
The question is the same, Paul, in any NFL city. When they have success, in order to sustain it, it's all about asset allocation. and they've got to figure out how they want to spend their money and how to divide up the pie. It's no different. The Bills are a little different. The Bills, as in BUILDS, are a little different because of the people involved. But the underlying factor is it's all about resource allocation, and that really is the cap.
All right, let's take a quick detour to the Buffalo Bills, the team that fell apart, the team that, got punched in the face by the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is a team that was considered the Super Bowl favorites heading into this year, and they started off with a bang, dismantling the then Super Bowl champions, or the reigning Super Bowl champs, until one is officially crowned here in a couple weeks. The LA Rams, I think a lot of us said, well, watch out for this Buffalo team. Look how this team is constructed. Yet it seems like, what is it now, the third year in a row, when you think of the AFC Championship game, divisional game, and now divisional game again, the Buffalo Bills have sort of fallen on their face here, Randy, which leads me to this. People today, instant coffee in the microwave still isn't fast enough. There is a bloodlust among Bills Mafia. They want some level of heads to roll because they were Super Bowl or bust. Whether you believe it or not, that's what they were pounding the table about before the season. Well, they didn't win the Super Bowl, so I guess this season was a failure. Are you in a position, Randy, where you believe that some important head should roll here for the Buffalo Bills, or do they stick with what's been working that's quite frankly gotten them in this position in the first place?
Well, it's a fine line, that's for sure. You can't really sit on your hands or your laurels because they haven't got there yet. And 2 years have gone by, whether it was 13 seconds of incompetence from a year ago or start to finish against the Bengals the other day. It's a struggle. So I do think you have to expect a certain amount of change. They can't say that we're good enough because we're not. So they can't not make some change, and they can't not make some additions. The manner in which Cincinnati pushed them around up front on both sides of the ball would tell me, if I was Brandon Beane, that we need to get more physical at the point of attack. That's a struggle. We've got to generate a pass rush without Von Miller. We can't put it all on him. So they didn't rush the passer. They didn't do some things that I thought they might be able to do. This team is a little bit size-wise challenged, in my opinion, and it really showed in a matchup against the Bengals, who themselves had 3 backup offensive linemen playing, but it didn't affect them. They still got the movement at the point of attack, and they still ran the ball at will, and they kept Joe Burrow upright, and that's the big thing. So maybe this can be a blessing in disguise. You don't want to have 2 years go by of Josh Allen's career, because I think their window is similar to Cincinnati, is it's always open. The other thing is they had become so Josh Allen dependent on offense. It's almost like whatever they call, Josh just makes something happen. Now, I don't know that system, I think losing Brian Daboll had an effect. I think that is not one that's been figured out yet. And they just can't put it all on Josh Allen. One, health is going to be a problem. He's not going to be young and stronger than everybody forever. So they're going to have to devise a way to keep him somewhat safe. And the other thing is they've got to find a way to run the ball effectively in a fashion that can take some of the passing game pressure off him. Again, schematically, maybe this is a little bit of a slap in the face for them. It's kind of a wake-up call. Hey, we got to change some things. We got to do some things right. Maybe Ken Dorsey isn't Brian Daboll. We got to tweak some of the things he does. I'm not sure I would have heads roll at this point, but they definitely have to examine their own processes and look in the mirror to see, are we really doing this the right way on both sides of the ball? In my opinion, their defense let them down just as much as anybody. That's the scheme that didn't have any resistance to Joe Burrow, and it was right off Jump Street. So their plan was faulty to start with.
Yeah, because, you normally like to run the defensive game plan where you're 10 yards off a receiver in the snow. What the hell was going on out there, Leslie Frazier, for Pete? I love Leslie, but good Lord have mercy. I had no idea what the heck was going on over there, and confounding to say the least. Randy, you said that there is that fine line of whether to blow it up or not, because on some sense people say, well, we've invested a few years in whatever it is, whether it's coaching or players or this, and well, we've already put in 3 years. Why not throw in another year into the mix? But on the other side, knowing when to rip off the Band-Aid is important. And your good buddy, I don't know if you saw this clip, but Mickey Loomis for the Saints, we had a media member come up to him and say, hey man, it must be time to blow this thing up. And he went, blow this thing up? And he had this great response saying, oh no, we're far away from that. But thanks for the question. And again, the constant thing of, in this instant world that we're in here, Randy, in 2023, that question's always there if you didn't just win the Super Bowl.
And I think it takes some guts of GMs to not be knee-jerk as well. But I also think I always enjoyed the questions because it did make me pause and think. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to hear what everybody says. All it can do, Paul, is really give you more time to discuss and gather information. It's kind of like when you get ready for the draft. I like to hear all the mock drafts that week before, because it made me maybe think of something that I hadn't thought of yet. So I think all these situations that you bring up where a GM gets posted up by fans or media about making changes, it's all right. I like to hear their voice. Why should we? I probably would have came back with a quip of Mickey's. Why do you think we should change? Just to see if that guy has an idea, or if he's just knee-jerk answering some fan mail that said, hey, you need to blow it up because we lost so many games.
And by the way, I wish more GMs would do that in general, because I've had it here in Syracuse. We have Jim Boeheim. So every once in a while, he'll put the media member on the heel saying, well, what do you think we should do? And then they'll be like, well, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, now back to the next question. So we can get a little bit of that as well, which is always fun. So I love that, Randy, doing it for there. Now we're going to do a little bit of a new drill here. Some interesting topics that are kind of, mosh posh, kind of all over the place here. I know this is a guy you did a film breakdown on. So I want to hear more on Brock Purdy, who is the story of the NFL. But before we get there, Randy, I just have to say, quite frankly, as a NFL historian, as an NFL fan, I was absolutely disgusted, absolutely appalled that San Francisco 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy, who started 5 games this year, 5 in a 17-game season, is a finalist for the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Randy, what the flying hoot here? That it seems insulting to the award's history that the fact that, first off, he could even potentially be, obviously as a finalist, he is up for the award. It sounds even crazy that he's even a finalist, considering should there be some level of a prerequisite that you have to play at least, 6 games in terms of starting before you could be eligible for this? What's going on here, Randy?
That's spoken like a true Jets fan who hopes Garrett Wilson I
guess that is true.
Or Breece Hall or one of these guys should have been in the mix, but it is what it is. I'll say this about Brock Purdy. Is there going to be a more, what's the word I'm looking for? A better story?
Controversial?
Yeah. I'm talking about, is there going to be a better story if he leads the 49ers to the Super Bowl? And that's going to happen in 3 days. So, so you can say there should be a criteria, but
yeah,
I can't think of anybody who I would reward more than this kid who was drafted where he was, who was undefeated and not lost a game and takes his team to the Super Bowl. That's a pretty good. Yeah. That's pretty good bio to have. I don't care what award is being doled out.
That's fair enough. And immediately on the Garrett Wilson, Randy, you're as witty and quick as ever. Immediately calling out the Garrett Wilson bias that may or may not be included in this program again for Brock Purdy. But by the way, I saw this trending on Twitter just to bring it up again. If they said now that Brock Purdy is a finalist for the Offensive Rookie of the Year, they said if we're taking rookies that may have only played 5 games, and maybe Breece Hall has suddenly entered the discussion for all those crazy Jets people out there, that may be possible. But in all seriousness, let's dive into Brock Purdy here, Randy. And again, he is a fascinating guy, and you've dove into the tape a little bit here. Some people have said that it's Kyle Shanahan as this kind of wizard guy, and he can get me or you playing quarterback and figure it out. Or is it really a mix of finding this next great thing that they kind of stumbled into here in Brock Purdy? What does the tape say?
Well, I think if it were that easy, Jimmy Garoppolo would have done it as well, and Trey Lance would have done it already. So I do think we've got to get him credit, give Purdy credit. I think Shanahan credit, and the playmakers that they've put around them. And so you got to give John Lynch credit as well. But it is a somewhat perfect storm. And I've been skeptical, Paul. I've said, well, there's got to be some reason. There's some fatal flaw. So when I dove into it, I thought, I'm going to find the flaw. When I came out the other end, I didn't really find the flaw, Paul. I think this kid has a skill set that he knows and understands. I would say this, at the end of the day, the only weakness that I could find is maybe an average arm, and that's arm strength, velocity. And that's something that when you work them out, or when you go to a pro day or in Indianapolis, the arm strength is the first thing everybody comes away with saying, his arm's average, and all of a sudden he's not thought of at high standards. But you put 11 people on 11 people out there, Brock Purdy's instincts, his anticipation, his accuracy on the move, his ability to adjust and process information, which none of that you get in a pro day. None of that do you get at the combine workout in Indianapolis, but those are his strengths. So the process kind of did him a disservice, or evaluators that didn't consider all this other stuff, it definitely did them a disservice. But I found that he has all of that. He's limited somewhat as a runner, but he can move well enough in the pocket to get away from pressure. He can keep plays alive. He doesn't throw as easily on the run when he breaks out of the pocket. But to the other end of that is he doesn't try crazy throws either because he knows he can't do it. So he kind of knows his weakness, like I said initially. This kid understands football really well, and you can tell his intangibles are really good. His demeanor, his look, his personality is the same, and I absolutely love that about a quarterback. I want him to be – I'll just say this. My hero growing up was Tom Landry, the coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
And the reason I loved him was you could not tell if the Cowboys were winning, losing. You talk about a poker face now.
Yeah.
This was the ultimate poker face. And that's what I get from Brock Purdy. I get a poker face day in and day out. It's the same play in and play out. Nothing shakes him up. I love that. It's like rainwater. He just brushes it off. So, I like what this kid has done physically. I don't see any warts that make him fatally flawed, in my opinion. And it shows. The fact that he can process information, get the ball out in a timely fashion, put it accurately on the target, makes me believe that he's going to play for a long time. There may be more athletic. There may be bigger arms. Trey Lance, somebody like that. I don't see how this kid cannot start 2023 as a 49er starting quarterback, and I don't think they'll be out shopping for an upgrade. That's how good I feel about what I've seen so far. And you can say 5 games, but it's been a steady 5 games. It hasn't been an ups and downs like you normally get with rookies. Now, some of that is because the talent around him is really good, and Kyle Shanahan's really good, but you can't fault the kid for that.
100%. And to your point, I think there was another 49ers quarterback that didn't have the greatest arm. I think he won 4 Super Bowls. Joe Montana, not too shabby for all of those people that have the arm questions.
He played in the same fashion, Paul. It's the same thing. He does not take crazy arm angles and attempt crazy throws because he knows he's got to play within his limits. But he didn't make bad decisions. He threw it on time and accurate. It's the same kind of skill set.
All right, let's go with a couple other quickies before we sign off. And the New England Patriots, they have also hired their new offensive coordinator, but it's an old face, Bill O'Brien. And I feel like we're back to Bill O'Brien again, who was here just a handful of years ago, had a quick pit stop back in Alabama. Nick Saban has this, he must have this nurturing farm where he brings in wounded birds and then he brings them back to life and then sends them back out and they're in the NFL again. Brian Dable, we have Bill O'Brien. He has a long list of these guys kind of coming in and then being ushered back out, which is kind of interesting. Can Bill O'Brien fix the New England Patriots offense here, Reddy, which looked broken last year?
Well, he definitely got sent to the rehab center like so many have, and Nick comes out the other end and they have a golden ticket tied to their arm and somebody pays them and somebody buys it. I think in this case, this is a clear upgrade from where they were before. We shouldn't criticize Bill Belichick. I get it. Great coach, greatest ever. What they did with their offense this year is borderline malpractice. I mean, that to me is just crazy to give 2 guys that role who neither had ever done it before. This is not on the job training. And again, I know Bill has done what he's done. I could not have ever bought or signed off on that. I think Bill O'Brien clearly upgrades them. They had an IQ of offensive football acronym drain when Josh McDaniels left, and it never got filled. I think Bill O'Brien does fill that. I think whether he's successful or not, we'll have to see because I don't think they have great people on the perimeter and up front to really have a great offense. But I think Mac Jones should be happy because he will have a process. He will have a steady set of criteria that he goes through on a weekly basis. And you could tell he was frustrated throughout really the whole season. So I think it's something that had to be done. Bill always goes back to familiarity. Those guys know Bill. Probably Nick and Bill aren't for everybody, but obviously in this case, Bill O'Brien knows what he's getting into. I think it's a good move for the Patriots. I think now the question will be, Mac Jones, is he really good enough, or are we just, biding time to find another guy for this chair? That pressure will be on Mac, and he'll enter this offseason having to prove to people that he's the guy because he definitely digressed this year, not all of his own doing.
Yeah, and another interesting thing here is that I wonder if, when Josh McDaniels goes, he becomes the Las Vegas Raiders head coach, if there's a sense of arrogance, like, I'm Bill Belichick, of course I can figure it out. And it must have worked because us as people, while initially it seemed crazy that Matt Patricia and Joe Judge were kind of cobbled in this position, a lot of us said, well, it is Bill Belichick. So he got the benefit of the doubt from a lot of us when they concocted this crazy plan in the first place. So maybe it was a little bit of that. And then getting back to it here with now Bill O'Brien coming back, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Nobody gets more rope than Bill, but nobody deserves more rope than Bill. This was just a hard one for some of us to connect the dots to make sense of. It was even outlandish, I think, for Bill's sake. Could you imagine another coach having tried this? I mean, he would have got crucified in the media. They would have even worse than what Bill did. And I know Bill could care less what you or I or anybody says.
Absolutely.
But a lot of cities wouldn't have stood for it as well as he sold it. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Let's get another couple in here. First off, there's some rumors going around that, and some NFL insiders predicted this for a longer ESPN column, that if Andy Reid got a second Super Bowl ring, of course he already has one with the Patrick Mahomes in that second season when he had a 50 touchdown pass, it was looking spectacular. That if Andy Reid got a second Super Bowl ring with the Kansas City Chiefs this year, he could retire. What do you say to that? Because at the same time, if I'm Andy Reid, and even if I can go have my cheeseburgers and everything else Andy Reid enjoys, that I would still be so tempted with how young Patrick Mahomes is. I could ride this wave and maybe win a couple more championships. So I'm not so sure. What say you, Randy?
Well, it's the first I've heard of it, but I would love nothing more than to see that, Paul. I love for people to go out on their own terms. I love for people to retire and you don't see it anymore. Everybody hangs in there till the end because the money's so crazy for most part. I don't think that's what motivates Andy Reid. I think Andy's motivated by helping people, by being part of his team, by seeing these guys succeed. And you're right. He has been there, done that. He shouldn't have anything else to prove. If he wins another one, I kind of hope he does. I think it would be awesome. He'll go down as a legend in two cities, really, Philly and Kansas City. He'll be a Hall of Fame coach without a doubt anyway. So I would love to see him enjoy life and not grind it out for 16 or 18 hours like that seems to be the norm nowadays for NFL coaches. So it'd be interesting to see who they put in charge if that happens, whether it's Eric Bieniemy, the guy they've been trying to sell for years now to a lot of other franchises, or somebody else that they brought in. So I don't know. I don't have any insight on Andy Reid, but I think it'd be kind of cool. I always said, and I told my family this, if we ever win a Super Bowl, meet me at the car, not at midfield. Because that's good enough for me. Let everybody else take the credit. Let everybody else get whatever they want. We would have been there, done that. I'll be at the car and we're going fishing.
And wouldn't that be poetic if we get the Andy Reid Bowl, Chiefs, Eagles, and then potentially gets a chance to walk away after giving it to the old place that he took to 5 NFC championship games. Wow.
Awesome story.
There is a story potentially to be had there for old Andy Reid, which, by the way, again, would just be absolutely stunning if that ends up coming to fruition. We'll kind of see how that one ends up playing out. And by the way, you mentioned that, and some off the top of my head of guys who sometimes get the Hollywood script. It doesn't always happen. Jerome Bettis allowed that to happen. And we've had Peyton Manning, although he was kind of near the back end of that actual walk away. Michael Strahan, another one off the top of my head of just players that got that poetic ending. Again, it doesn't always work that way.
I think John Elway got it in Denver too, right? Didn't he win back-to-back and walked away?
He did, beating my Jets. Randy, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that in the late 90s, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. All right, this was fun. All right, this is the last time we're ever doing the show. All right, thank you, everybody.
Hey, I only say it with love, Paul, because he ruined more of my Sundays in my 20 years in Seattle than anybody in the history of that played Seattle. So Seattle fans will understand that.
All right, let's end on this. This one is fascinating. We had this one sent into us on the Dallas Cowboys situation. You have Ezekiel Elliott, who's in an impossible contractual situation. Tony Pollard, who they've been giving more and more run, the former Memphis player, super versatile, could play a little running back, a little wide receiver. He gets hurt and has tightrope surgery over the weekend, and he's going to be out for a handful of months. And unfortunately, it just kind of works out this way. He is a pending free agent. The Cowboys have a ton of money already invested in Zeke. It almost feels a little similar to Michael Gallup, who was due for a big deal last year, but was coming off a major injury. Would the Cowboys, kind of give the tip of the cap to the player that they know, or they kind of let him test his own market and pay him kind of a cheap deal? Michael Gallup ended up getting a very handsome deal in his own right, but the same thing for Pollard here. How the heck do you figure out this running back situation? Because it seems very complicated to try to piece together.
I think you've got to be honest with yourself, whether you're Jerry Jones or anybody else as decision makers within the Cowboys network. They've got to find out who the options are. And if someone is an option that's better for us than Zeke Elliott and even Pollard, they've got to pull the trigger on it because they know this. They're not good enough. The team is not good enough. That's been proven. They're not consistent enough. They've got to find ways to add talent, whether it's replacing a receiver or a runner. I would take those cards and have my free agent board set, and I would plug Zeke Elliott's name in there. I would plug Pollard's name in there. I would plug Gallup's name in there with the receivers. And anybody above where they are, we need to make a push. We need to try to get them. Anybody below it, obviously that comes off the chart, and we don't need to go there. But I think teams got to do that more than we read about. They seem to be loyal to their own people, and I understand that. But if you don't get better, it's going to be hard for the results to be different. What's the saying? The definition of being an idiot is to keep doing the same thing over and over without ever changing it.
Yes.
You got to change what you're doing, and sometimes that means letting go of who used to be good players. I know this, the Cowboys need to upgrade a bunch of places on their roster. It's been proven now for the last few years that what they have put together, although some of us liked it, and I've always been one to credit them as putting together a talented roster, it hasn't worked. So they need change. I think you're seeing some of that in the coaching staff ranks with Dallas this week in letting go a bunch of guys. So it's not necessarily those coaches' fault, but they need some change in Dallas. And I don't think it is Mike McCarthy. And I'm not blaming any coaches. I just think they need a roster remake and a whole bunch of different things to kind of reset the deck for next year.
It is an incredibly rich free agent class at the running back position, and man, Saquon Barkley is out there. Giants to Cowboy. I know Jerry Jones would love the headline of
boy.
that move. Oh, my Lanta. Oh, yes, that could be quite sexy, but we'll have to see because, again, moving on from Zeke almost seems like an impossibility based on the contract structure this offseason. Now, although, as we've seen over the years, nothing is ever impossible when it comes to the cap, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that one. Randy, a wild show, a fun Final Four that we're going to have this weekend, which no matter what will give us a fantastic Super Bowl matchup, which I'm looking forward to, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it as we get even closer. Randy, another great one. Thanks, brother.
My pleasure, Paul. Good to do it, and can't wait to do it again next week.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next